Hi, I'm Teresa and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up. So July wasn't my best reading month, but it wasn't the worst. It's painfully average. So I read 7 books this month and I have to say I've enjoyed them less than I did previous months. So I'm quite disappointed by that, but they're ones I want to talk about even if they're not new favourites. So a lot of the books I'm going to be mentioning in this video will also appear in my third Sapphic Reads video. And I've noticed that basically my wrap-ups, my Sapphic reads are very repetitive. So I think I'm going to try and talk just a little bit less about those Sapphic books and then I can talk about them in more detail in that video. So yeah, I'll just be talking slightly less about them now. So this month I read an awful lot of arcs. I'm quite behind. So there's going to be a lot of putting up pictures because I don't have physical copies of them. And yes, so the first book I read was Girl, Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashardoust. This is a Persian myth inspired high fantasy standalone, and it's quite short. And I was very impressed at how well contained it was for a short standalone fantasy, but being so fleshed out. And I just really enjoyed this book. It is about this girl called Soraya who is a princess, but she's kept out of the public eye. She doesn't really get to see anyone because she is cursed to be poisonous to the touch. And it's about her and kind of her journey as she tries to find a way to break her curse. And yes, it's very good. And Soraya is such a good, morally grey character, and she's got this gorgeous, incredible magic system. It's just so rich, and you've got the kind of theme of stories, which is something I adore in a book. And this is going to be my Sapphic Reads video because your main character Soraya is bi, and you've got a male and a female love interest. And because of me, I'm a bit partial to the female love interest, Parvane. She is just incredible. I love her a lot, and I very much do recommend this book. I did give it 4 stars. I just find it slightly slow to start and a bit predictable. But other than that, I really recommend it, and I really enjoyed it. The next book I want to talk about is my only 5-star read of the month, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love this book so much. I read it in practically one sitting and I was crying for the last 100 pages. It was just so good, and I knew that sad things would happen. They tell you at the start, but it still just broke me. Honestly, I kept thinking about it like later on, hours later, and I just tear up. Like, it's so good. So this is a book you probably heard of before. It is also Sapphic. Who's surprised? And it is about this star from the 1950s called Evelyn Hugo, and she's retelling her life story and the story of her 7 marriages to a journalist. And you know that they've got some kind of connection between the journalist and Evelyn, and you're kind of waiting to find that out, but you're also just Evelyn's story is so immersive and intriguing, and it's just so much fun until you get to the end, and then it's just pain. And I just really enjoyed it. Evelyn, you find out in the book, is bi, and there is a female love interest at some point in among the 7 husbands, and I just adored Evelyn and her love interest, the female one and one of the male ones. Harry is just, he's a cutie. And this is one that I also very much recommend and will probably talk more about in my Sapphic Reads video. The next book I read was The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. I haven't rated this one because I don't know how to rate it because I've never read a book in verse before, but I really did enjoy this and I flew through it in one sitting, and my fingers ended up stained from the ink because it's got some black pages, and I just ended up staining my fingers. And it's so good. It's such a good story and just absolutely gorgeous writing. And I love the kind of not fully multimedia, but there's those other elements to it, and it just made it gorgeous to look at and to read. So I think I'll end up rereading this with the audiobook at some point, but it is just very, very just gorgeous. I've said it so many times, but it is. So this is about Michael, who is a mixed race gay teen living in London, and it follows him from childhood to about uni, and it's just about him accepting himself and understanding his identity and how he fits in as being mixed race. He feels like he can't fully connect to either the Jamaican side or the Cypriot side. And it's so good and explores drag, and it's just one that I do definitely recommend. The next book I read was Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan. This was very, very good. It's one I've been anticipating for a while because so many people I know adore it, and I wanted to adore it too. And I did really, really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars, but it wasn't just quite a 5 star. So this is an Asian inspired fantasy, and it follows a main character called Lei, and it's about her being chosen as a paper girl to serve the king, and the paper girls are essentially used for sex, and it's not exactly consensual, really. It's like they're chosen and they don't really get a choice, but to a lot of families it's a great honour, but to Lei it is not. There is an FF romance in it. I don't know if there's particulars on lesbian or bi rep or whatever, because fantasy is not very specific usually, but it does have the most gorgeous romance, and I adored it so much. It's very good, very rich, and I'm really excited to read the second book. So obviously this book touches on themes of sexual assault, so beware of that, but it's handled very, very delicately, and the author is a survivor, and there's trigger warnings and there's a note at the front, and I do highly recommend it for that sensitivity, and also just for a really good book and a gorgeous romance. The next book I read was The Black Kids by Christina Hammonds Reid. This book comes out at the start of August, so it might actually already be out by the time I post this video. So this book is set in 1992 in Los Angeles, and it follows a very privileged black teenager called Ashley. She's basically comes from a very rich and affluent family and lives in, the nice part of town and goes to school for the rich kids really, and obviously that means that there's not a lot of black people around her, and she kind of is basically just one of the very few black kids at her school. When the Rodney King riots break out across the city, she becomes no more than a black girl in the eyes of so many people. So these riots are very, very real. They happened, and it follows an incident of police brutality against a black man, and then the officers all being acquitted from the assault charge, and it's very, very similar to what happened to George Floyd and so many others recently. And so it's a very, very topical and timely book, and it's really scary how it's set in 1992, and so many of the things they're saying are things that we're still saying now and discussing now, and we still have those same problems. And it's just a book that I do very much recommend for the kind of themes it explores of race and identity and just things like that, classism, all of those. But also, it's very much a coming of age story, and just Ashley connecting with her identity and her family and her friends and just her place in the world. And yes, it is a book that I do definitely recommend that everyone picks up when it comes out. The next book I read was Cinderella is Dead by Callan Bayron. This was one of my most anticipated reads of the year, and I'm so upset to say that it was actually a disappointment for me. I ended up not really enjoying it, and so upset, so mad about it. So this book takes place in a society 200 years after the death of Cinderella, and you know the fairy tale is very much real, and it's become kind of the foundation for the society, and it's incredibly misogynistic. It's very classist. There's just not rights for women, and it's a very clear rich poor divide. And your main character Sophia is a lesbian, and she is quite resistant to this society, and she doesn't want to go to the annual ball where all the girls are forced to go to be picked by a suitor like Cinderella. She doesn't want to go at all. She would much rather just run away with her girlfriend or anything else, really, but her girlfriend is too scared, she doesn't want to. So Sophia ends up on this kind of path of wanting to overthrow the patriarchy and wanting to rebel and such. And eventually she meets Constance, who is the last living descendant of Cinderella's family. And together they kind of uncover the truth around Cinderella's story and basically try and take down the patriarchy. And there's a romance there, it's lesbians taking down the patriarchy, it's fab. But for me, I really struggled with it. I found it just very not well written, to be honest. I found the characters so flat and lacking any kind of depth or development, and that then went into the relationship as well. It's just there's nothing there, no chemistry, and I found the plot very easy and predictable, and that just made it a bit boring. There's no tension. So it is one that I would recommend. I know so many people have loved it, but for me personally, I just wasn't a fan. I did like the way it tackled misogyny and played with, you know, the truth behind stories and such like that. I found that very, very interesting. I just didn't think the rest of the book was very well executed, and that makes me so upset. But I do still recommend it, and I would encourage people to pick it up. The final book I read this month was Seven Devils by Elizabeth May and Laura Lamb. This was another arc, and it comes out soon as well. This is an adult sci-fi, which I did not know when I requested it. I thought it was maybe a young adult, so that kind of scared me and made me avoid it for a while. But it was very, very good, and it didn't read too difficult, like it was fully adult, if that makes sense. But the main reason I wanted to pick it up was because it has an almost entirely queer cast. So you've got at least two sapphic characters. There's a sapphic romance, there's an ace character, and there's a trans character. And I just very much enjoyed this. It was yet again women teaming up and taking down the patriarchy, the empire. Honestly, there's a lot of things that you could say is like Star Wars or even like Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever. And I have to say, I'm not a big fan of sci fi in books or in films or whatever, but I really did enjoy this. Whereas Star Wars is boring and Guardians of the Galaxy are some of my least favourite Marvel films, so like, this is better than them to me. And it was just very cool and very well developed, and I'm very intrigued by the next book in the duology because shit went down at the end of this one, and I'm very excited to see how it'll be resolved. So this follows your seven characters. I think only five are point of view, and two of them are already part of the resistance. You've got Eris and you've got Chloe, and they were friends and now they're enemies because Chloe discovered that Eris is actually the supposedly dead princess of the Empire who was incredibly ruthless. So there's a lot of tension there. And you've also got three others who all just escape the Empire, end up meeting in with Eris and Chloe, and they end up having to go right back to the Empire to try and help take it down. And it is just so very good. I love the team dynamics, and I do very much recommend this one, even if you're not a massive sci-fi fan, because I managed to like it somehow. So yeah, that's all of the books I've read this month, and I did enjoy the most of them, but there weren't that many standout amazing ones, and I'm hoping for better next month, but it was still a very good reading month. So thank you very much for watching and supporting my channel, and I'm just so grateful. And yes, I will see you with another video sometime soon.